Hey everyone, it's Adam Farkas. Welcome to another ODwire webinar. Thanks so much for coming out tonight. And tonight is all about getting started with Tele-Optometry. And before I even launch into the speakers, I just have one quick anecdote. So I got referred to a specialist this week, a specialty medical practice, and much to my shock, when I got on the phone to make the appointment, the person there actually said to me, for this first visit, you don't really have to do it in person. We can do the first visit completely online. And I was blown away by that. That's the first time in my experience where I've ever actually entered into a new practice, a medical practice, no less, where they actually said, no, don't bother coming in if it's an inconvenience. We'll just do it online first. And to me, that was, obviously, since COVID, we've all done a lot of telehealth, but this was the first time I've ever actually had an initial encounter where they didn't even want to see me in person. So I thought that was kind of interesting and sort of apropos with what we're talking about here tonight, about how you might be able to implement some tools in your practice to sort of get you up to speed quickly on teleoptometry. And fortunately, we have experts here tonight to walk us through all of this. So we have Doctors Rothschild, Pandit, and Tchang, and Matt Vulich, who's an executive with Visionic. So between all of them, they're going to give you a really good overview in teleoptometry, how it works and how you can implement it in your practice. And again, as this talk unfolds, if you have questions, type them into the question box, and we'll have a spirited Q&A at the end. So with that said, why don't I get out of the way, and let me kill our little video windows here. I know it's always fun seeing each other, but I don't want it to get in the way of the slides. So let me take these webcams and shut them off here.
Wonderful. And Adam, thank you so much for the introductions. Really appreciate everyone's time and attention this evening. Our company has a really strong belief in being engaged and on camera, being a remote company, but definitely want everyone to be able to see the PowerPoint properly on display. So teleoptometry, is really a topic that's been gaining a lot of momentum within healthcare and our field. And as technology progresses and becomes more ubiquitous in eye care, I think the discussions and decisions that we make become even more important. So I just want to thank everyone again for being here this evening. So today's session really is packed with information, and it's going to aim to answer many commonly asked questions. So I'm going to start with a little overview of ocular telehealth. Then Dr. Rothschild is going to review his experience as a practice owner. Dr. Pandit is going to share what it's like to be a teleoptometrist, and Matt Vulich will be reviewing the nifty equipment that's needed for teleoptometry exams. So just a little bit of background to kind of kick us off, and why I think it's can be a game changer for both us and our patients. About myself, I grew up in a really small town on the coast of Alaska. I spent the summers commercial fishing for salmon. I also spent quite a bit of time volunteering and working abroad in Central and South America during my teenage years. And my parents are way cooler than I will ever be. That's why they took me abroad. Wasn't thrilled about it at that age, but it's actually what inspired me to pursue an undergrad degree in public health. So I then attended Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee for my undergrad, and Southern College of Optometry, also in Memphis, Tennessee. And they both just gave me such fantastic exposure and perspective to the inequities and access barriers that we have in healthcare, and specifically eye care. If we fast forward a few years, a colleague of mine, actually Dr. Rothschild, is who connected me with 2020 Now. Honestly, at first I was a little hesitant to consider a remote optometry position. I was worried, would I lose my chair skills? Would I be able to provide quality care? Would I miss working in person with colleagues? But after interviewing with the company and learning more about how the exams are conducted and seeing the vibrancy of the connections of the doctors and the team, I was sold. From there, I provided direct patient care, then served on the advisory board as liaison between the docs and leadership at 2020 Now, and then transitioned into the position of director of professional services. It has honestly been such an honor and privilege to work in this role. It's helped me bring a lot of my passions to life. It's given me an opportunity to collaborate with others and really promote and develop teleoptometry to try and benefit both patients and doctors. So telehealth, I think, is important for many reasons, but one of the most compelling reasons, in my opinion, are access barriers. Unfortunately, there's a lot of patients unable to access eye care providers, even here in the US. This map and the research was done by Baylor University, and it highlights areas with access to eye care or lack thereof. So the lighter the blue, the lower the availability or access to eye care. the darker the blue, the better the availability. So if we take my home state of Arizona and we focus in on the metro of Phoenix, even a really large and robust metro like Phoenix only has medium to low availability. So I don't think any of us are shocked by rural areas lacking access, but even those metro areas, there's still pockets where patients struggle to access eye care. And when patients lack access to eye care, I think we can probably all agree that issues can arise, undiagnosed vision problems, delayed detection of eye diseases, worsening of chronic conditions. And it's been pretty shocking in talking with some of my patients that sometimes it's been 5, even 10 years before they've been able to get an exam, and the remote exam is what has allowed them to now have access because they've maybe lost a doctor in their area or they never had one in their area. So really exciting to be able to help more patients. So if there's clearly this need for telehealth in our field to help meet the demands and improve access to eye care, what exactly is ocular telehealth? And really, it just refers to eye exams where part of or all patient care is delivered remotely. I specifically chose the word ocular telehealth because there's so many different terms that can be used, tele-optometry, tele-ophthalmology, tele-eye care. But I've been serving on the American Telemedicine Association Ocular Special Interest Group, which is an absolute mouthful, I know. We could just call it the ATA, Ocular SIG for short. And because they're leading the way in research and advocacy, and since this is the term that they use, it's the one that I find most appropriate. So for those of you who are maybe a little bit newer to the telemedicine scene, there's 2 really important terms that I would encourage everyone to take away from today, and that's synchronous and asynchronous. And so asynchronous exams refer to exams where the patient is worked up and then the doctor reviews the results at a later time. These type of services have existed for many years. A lot of my colleagues on the ATA Ocular SIG, they have patients within their community health centers who are maybe diabetic, and so they're getting these retinal screenings done, they're receiving these fundus photos, and then maybe at the end of the day, at a later time frame, the doctor is reviewing and interpreting those images to determine the next best steps. A little bit newer to the scene is synchronous care, and that refers to exams where the patient and doctor are able to talk and or video conference call in real time. The most important thing is that this is happening in real time at the same time. So some examples of this would be like emergency rooms, sometimes consult with optometrists and ophthalmologists. They'll have the doctor video call in and assess the eye emergency, talk with the patient, trying to determine how to triage it. A lot of optometrists and ophthalmologists will even use video or phone calls to talk with their patients for dry eye evaluations, red eye consults, so on. But what we're really going to focus on today are synchronous comprehensive exams where the patient is going into a location on site, be that an optical, a Walmart, Costco, Sam's Club, or an independent optometrist, and then the doctor is remotely calling in. So that's the focus today. And that is really our primary focus at 2020 Now. So we provide both the platform and the doctors to see patients in this type of exam. So at our core, we're really a technology company. We have this proprietary interface engine that allows us to route patients based on doctor licensure. And we have an EMR built to integrate all the diagnostic imaging and telehealth services seamlessly in this process. And then we have the doctors who can provide the services for patients. So what this really means, if you're interested in adding tele-optometry to your practices, is that there's an array of ways that you can do this. I'm just going to use 2020 Now as an example, but for example, you could either A, be the provider and just use the software, or B, you could use the software and platform we have, plus our doctors for the professional services. So if you wanted to just use the platform, some examples would include like if you maybe want to work from home one day a week, but still see your own patient. If you wanted to work from home during a specific time of the year, a lot of doctors, during the holidays, maybe they want to travel, but still work a few days. That can be a great option. If you're immunocompromised or maybe get sick, then you can still work from home. Whereas situations where providers will often choose to use both the 2020 Now software and our doctors is maybe they have a really long waiting list and want to use an open exam lane that they have in their office to begin offering more exams and decrease that wait time. Maybe a doctor is working towards retirement and wants to decrease their hours without adding an associate. Then you could add 2020 Now doctors at the end of the day or a couple days a week, or of course you could always do some type of combo. So what exactly is the exam flow for a 2020 Now exam? What happens first is the patient is going to book an appointment. They could call, they could book it online, various different methods to do this. And from there, they're going to fill out an intake, either on the iPad, sent via email, etc. And so we're going to have the intake that the patient fills out. We're going to have a bunch of consent forms to explain the process and what they're signing up for, make sure that they want to do a telemedicine exam, and ensure that that's all stored in the electronic medical record. The patient will then walk into the exam lane accompanied by the on-site patient. So they're going to come into the office and then they're going to be accompanied to the exam lane with the on-site patient care coordinator. And this technician is going to complete the standard pre-testing and imaging. Really everything we learned in school, the whole battery, ARK, EOMs, pupils, color vision, IOP, confrontational field, stereo, all of that's going to be tested in addition to imaging of the front and back of the eye. And that diagnostic info is getting uploaded into the patient's chart in real time. So the next step, what's going to occur next is that the doctor and technician are going to connect, or technician, just depends on state regulations, are going to connect to the computer on site, and then they're going to control the phoropter. So the phoropter will get placed in front of the patient by the on-site technician. The doctor has called in and they're able to also connect to the computer on site to control the phoropter and gather that refractive data. So it's just like a refraction, in person, except that the doctor is remote and on video call, and it's done in this real-time two-way synchronous exam using the proprietary software we have for the refraction. The doctor's then going to review the results. They're going to verify the prescriptions, do any trial frames and additional checks if needed, and they'll review all the ancillary testing that has come in. They're going to look at all the imaging, and then they're going to talk about all these findings with the patient. So, at the end of the exam, what we end up with is the prescription is going to be signed, if applicable, and printed, of course, for the patient. A referral will be written and discussed with the patient if needed. And then, of course, there's additional steps if the patient does need referred. And then the patient is going to provide feedback via survey, and the exam is complete. So really not that different from an in-person exam. So in order to offer these services, I think one of the most critical questions our team is always thinking about is when is a comprehensive exam where the patient is coming in on site, but the doctor is remote appropriate. We currently operate in 36 states, and one of the basic first steps we have to follow are state-specific regulations for ocular telehealth. The restrictions and regulations differ from optometrist and ophthalmologist, and in fact, in most states, it's a little bit more restrictive on ODs than MDs. And I think this is something that as a field, we really need to wrestle with and reconsider as primary eye care providers and gatekeepers of the patient's eye health. The next obligation we have is to ensure the patients want a telehealth exam. It's pretty surprising. There's often some of these older patients who are really excited about it. They love how new and innovative and fun it can be, and they find that it's actually very comprehensive. And so we've done this through intake forms, by explaining the process to patients, by checking in on them throughout the exam, and it's really fun to see how many of them usually end up enjoying it. Lastly, and most importantly, we have to make sure that they're an appropriate candidate for telehealth by looking at their medical and ocular history and what's bringing them in. If they just had a foreign body in their left eye, then they are going to need to see an in-person doctor to get that foreign body removed. This is not the right type of exam for them. So we have age restrictions, we have restrictions for patients with, for example, double vision, certain health anomalies, and most importantly, it's It's the doctor's licenses, it's their professional experience and judgment that is always helping to guide and determine if the patient is a good candidate for telemedicine. So on that note, someone who is very experienced in the nuances of knowing when teleoptometry can be the right fit for patients is my colleague, Dr. Mike Rothschild. He, as I said, played an instrumental role in my discovering 2020 now in telehealth, and I really hope you all enjoyed learning from him tonight as much as I have. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tchang, and I really wanted to thank you all for being here this evening and logging in later to listen to this recording, because this is an exciting topic that I have been involved in for many years. And I want to real quickly just tell you my story and how I got here. But I appreciate the interest and the exploration of doing this, and hope you're here for more than the Starbucks card, but that certainly is a nice way to get you here. But thank you for being here tonight and have this interest. So my story is right now I work as the director of consulting for Vision Source, and for years I had a small town practice that I eventually sold because I found that I had a lot more reward and was more fulfilled in my consulting business. So the consulting business started growing. I was able to spend less and less time in my practice, and throughout my career in my practice, I was always committed to making sure that we provided the best care that we could to our patients. So just like every small town optometrist, we took care of everything. We were primary care in this area. So in addition to glasses and contacts, we took care of all kinds of disease, injuries, emergencies, everything. And our relationships with our patients were critical to what we did. And so during that time, I worked with a cloud-based EHR. And so I became interested in the amount of data available in all of our EHR systems and all of the opportunities that we have to network together, and started looking for opportunities. And during this traveling and consulting, and like Dr. Tchang said, I had a chance to work with students from time to time, and it's so rewarding to have those explorations about what you can do when your entire career is in front of you. So I had a lot of those opportunities. And so I found that there was a big need in rural areas for optometry practices. We're having a hard time finding optometrists to work in these locations, and the patients, the people, they have a lot of need. And so I committed myself and opened up a practice pre-pandemic. So we were interested in this before it was something that a lot of people were talking about, or before everybody started engaging in it. We looked for ways, and I was committed to making sure that, number one, it could be done in a good, honorable way with offering quality care, but also that we could enhance the relationships with our patients. And I'm here to tell you that it can be done, and we learned so much in doing this. I call it my R&D practice, research and development, because we were trying to find a new way to do something, and we wanted to explore these different opportunities. And I'm just going to share with you my experience on how we were able to do that. So Dr. Tchang talked a good bit about the differences between asynchronous and synchronous. And I just want to highlight that a little bit more because it is really important. So just as a reminder from a few minutes ago, asynchronous means that the doctor or the provider and the patient aren't necessarily in the same place at the same time. You're reviewing a retinal image, the next day and seeing if there's diabetic retinopathy and sending a report. That's an example of asynchronous care. Synchronous is when the provider and the patient are communicating in real time. And there's so many varieties. And within our practice, there are several ways that we're all doing this. So I just identified them a little bit more, and I just really briefly kind of want to go through them before we talk about what we're doing here today. So when we do supportive care, so that's kind of what Adam's story was at the beginning of our webinar tonight. He talked about he went to see a doctor, or was going to see a doctor for the first time, and his initial visit was actually online. And so he began his relationship with a new doctor online. And so that conversation is what we call supportive, because it's work that is done before the live visit. A VAHOV is something that a lot of us have done before, And that's a virtual, just meaning that you're connected online. You're not in the same place at the same time. And the patient is at home optometry visit. So if a patient sends you a text message picture of their eye and they say, is this pink eye? I'm sure that's happened to all of us. And if you answer yes, or if you answer no and you treat it, then you have done a VAHO. You have treated the patient while they're at home. Consultative is when you're sending images or working remotely with a specialist of some sort. Remote monitoring is sending home some sort of equipment that the patient uses themselves, and that information can be uploaded and you can monitor it, and there are ways to bill for that. That's called remote monitoring. And a comprehensive exam with a remote provider is exactly what it says. And again, to Dr. Chang's point, we all have different words to describe it, and you tend to use the bigger words to make sure that we're all on the same page about what we're talking about. But we are able to effectively give complete eye exams, comprehensive eye exams, with the provider not being there, and be proud of the work that we do because it is so comprehensive. So what I want to do is I just want to share with you how we've done it in our practice and the tools that we use and the questions that we answered for figuring out exactly how it could be done. My rule number one, and it's something that anytime I talk about this subject, I want to make sure that people understand it, is that the doctor, you as the provider, are responsible for deciding whether the information that you've got is enough to take good care of this patient. Dr. Chang used a great example of a foreign body. If you determine that there's a foreign body in this patient's eye, or might be a foreign body, then you've got to get them to the care that they need. But it's always our responsibility to use the information that we have available to decide what's best for the patient. Our liability is still there too, so we've got to lean on that. So always, whenever you're deciding equipment to use or decisions that you make, you've always got to put that patient first, understanding that they're exactly that you continue to be liable and responsible for taking care of that patient. So these are some more reasons that people may want to use it. So we did it because we wanted to explore, was it possible? Could it be done well? And we wanted to put a doctor in a rural area and make sure that it was there. But people are using tele-optometry for all sorts of reasons. We talked about having trouble finding an optometrist, which is big, and a lot of us are experiencing that. But also, you can see patients when you're not there on certain days of the week. You can see patients, have patients seen with tele-optometry while you're there. You're taking care of the things that are your passion and your, what I call your meat and potatoes exams. Your glasses exams and contact lenses can be done right across the hall as an extra stream of income. And it's just better convenience for the patients. One of my favorite terms is antidote to burnout. And that's a term that I learned from the American Telemedicine Association, because all professions are trying to figure out how to use telemedicine within their specialty. And I'll tell you, as somebody that's been practicing optometry for over 25 years, you start to get starts to get old after a while, and you start looking for different ways to do things. And by seeing patients remotely, it challenges you to think about things differently, and you see things in different order, and you're determining different ways to do it. And it really is a rewarding way to sort of reinvigorate yourself on a new way of seeing patients and take care of patients. So when we decided to add this to our practice, we had to ask ourselves several questions. And we wanted to come up with exactly how we're going to do this. And so we wanted to determine who. So that means, who is a good candidate for this? Is it appropriate for every patient? Then what are our protocols? Once we answer who are we going to see, let's talk about how we're going to do it. So what are we going to say to our patients? What kind of testing needs to be done? What's the order that we go in? When does the doctor remote in? Where does the information go? And then how are we going to say it to the patient? What disclaimers, if any, need to be given to the patients? What words do we need to say to the patient so that they can understand what's going to happen and what's different about this? We wanted to talk about the tools that we're going to use and the platforms, because there are several out there. and how we're going to communicate with the patient before, during, after the exam. And then we do what we call mapping out the visit, which is actually just going through the office flow. But the office flow is not even enough, because now the office is extended outside of the four walls of the building, because we're working with different people. And then we talk about how we're going to document this visit, because we all know that documentation is very important. So as you're looking at this, doctors, we have well over 100 doctors here tonight during the live webinar. And so I'd just like for you to think about this. If you're exploring this and you're thinking about doing this, just think about your answer to these questions. If you were going to explore providing this type of visit to your patients, what age is appropriate? Is it appropriate for pediatrics? What about older people? Is there an age limit? And what about if they have some sort of pathology like glaucoma, macular degeneration, all the ones that we check every day, or the systemic problems? And then let's also talk about contact lens wearers and when they were dilated last time. So what are you thinking? And I'm going to share with you my answers to these same questions. So as we were developing, this is kind of where I personally have settled. So I have found that most children that are 10 and up are able to cooperate enough to participate in this type of exam. They can answer the one or two questions when you're remotely have them in the phoropter, and they can put their chin where the technician asks them to put their chin. And then at 65, that was kind of our ceiling, because it's an easy one to remember, but also as they get older, the pupils get a little smaller, cataracts develop, so we had a higher percentage of not as good images. So that was my age range. And I can tell you this, the longer you do it, the more your age range starts to expand. Pathology is really good for this. I mean, because everything that we track pathology-wise, we do with retinal imaging or some sort of imaging, right? And all of that is still done, is still captured. And I can look at it on my remote computer just as well as I can on the computer in the office. And also diabetes, same argument for there. We can track diabetic retinopathy really well with retinal imaging. That's how we do it. And contact lens wearers with video, we do it that as well, because a lot of the testing with those contact lenses, it can be done with a remote phoropter, over refractions, but also video, we can capture video slit lamp images this way. And when they were last dilated, well, that's just back to rule number one. It just depends on your clinical judgment. What imaging do you have available? And what are the risk factors? And ultimately, it's your decision as the provider of when that is an appropriate decision. So what about the protocol? So these are images from my office, and we have cleaned up some of these random wires poking around that you see in the exam room, but you can see it's just like any other practice. So that's a wide angle image of it's a long, narrow office, in a retail space. And so the patient would walk in and go up to that front desk and check in, and when they're finished, they can come select eyewear in this gallery that we have, and they go into the pre-test room, and there's some equipment in there to do a visual field and get some imaging, and to do wave front aberrometry and all sorts of things that Matt's going to tell you about. And in the exam room, it's very typical exam room with the equipment in there as well. So just like everything else, they just walk up to the front desk. The technicians that are there are my technicians, my employees that take care of the patients according to our protocols and upload all of this information. And one point I like to make is this face-to-face? I really feel like you need a face-to-face exam. Well, let me tell you something. Doing remote eye exams, you are more face-to-face with your patients than you are when they are in our exam rooms, because we all use this same technology to take care of our patients. But what we tend to do when they're in the exam room is we turn our back on them so that we can look at the computer. And here we can look at the computer, look at their images, look at all of their data while looking into the webcam and looking directly at the patient. And so I argue that it's more personal when you're face-to-face with them, when you're remotely looking at them, because you're more face-to-face than if they're in your exam room. Just think about how much you turn your back on your patients when you're talking to them when you're in the exam room. The scripts Guys, I got to tell you, we explored all different ways to tell our patients about this. And what we found is the less we downplayed the quality of the exam. We used to go on and on about how this is a high quality exam. We're using the latest equipment. We can upload the information. And the doctor, while he's remote, he's still very, very good. And we just went on and on. So what we discovered is that the way that when we're scheduling our patients for this type of exam, we say these words: you will see your doctor live on a TV screen in the room. Everything else we do exactly the same throughout their exam. We don't make any difference about them seeing it, and it has worked out really, really well. We found that when we were over explaining it, we were talking too much. The platform that we use, so when we did this was a project with Vision Source and 2020 Now working together, and that's who we decided to go with. Dr. Tchang sort of explained the different platform levels that they can use. You can be your own doctor using this platform, but we utilized the 2020 Now doctors, and they earned our trust, right? We wanted to make sure, number one, that they could take good care of our patients and that they could help us build relationships with those patients. So we were able to utilize the 2020 Now platform, utilize their doctors, and I did some of my own exams as well, but ultimately settled on theirs. And we used all Visionics equipment because we wanted to make sure that it was high quality and equipment that we could count on and be sure that it was the highest quality of information available so that we could take care of our patients. Then we go on to the communication map visit, and every practice is different on how these systems work, right? And that's what I think is what a great opportunity is for teleoptometry is established practices. Either it's a satellite where the staff is established and you know what to do when things don't go exactly well, and everything else can be taken care of. Now, I'm not the only doctor that Dr. Tchang and 2020 Now knows who have done this type thing. There are several others, Dr. Tchang, am I right, that have utilized this service as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so we asked some of our employees at 2020 Now to also share a few words for this presentation tonight. And there were really two big takeaways. The first is that doctors absolutely love providing these services. You know, it's rewarding, it's exciting, it's novel, it's fulfilling, and it's really impactful to patients. I remember one of my doctors reaching out and she told me, Dr. Tchang, we just had a patient who's gone, 20 years without glasses, minus like 350 still, and she cried when we trial framed her today. So to have that impact is so rewarding. The other point to highlight is a commonality that I think we as a field are really wrestling with, and it's when is teleoptometry appropriate and how should it be regulated? I think our doctors, we always all want to protect our licenses. We always want to be acting in the patient's best interest. And unfortunately, there are some state boards that are prohibiting teleoptometry. And this is where I would love to see us as a profession maybe play a larger role. Because I think if we as a field don't step up and set standards and protocols for tele-eye care, then fear leads some states to block it completely as an option, or that void gets filled by actors who don't always have the patient's best interest at heart. So I can't speak, for anyone else, but what I can say is myself and the doctors at 2020 Now, we care immensely about our patients, and we're always striving for what's in our patient's best interest. I thought these quotes were just some great examples of that. Thank you, Dr. Rothschild. And so on that note, one person that really comes to mind when I talk about doctors and teleoptometry is my dear colleague, Dr. Sukumar Pandit. He's our most tenured doctor at 2020 Now, and he has always been just an outstanding mentor to myself and our team. He has integrity, he has courage, he always stands up for what is right. So I can't thank him enough for being here with us tonight, and I'll hand it over so he can share his experience as a remote optometrist and what it's been like over the years.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tchang, for those kind words. I'll make sure you get a Starbucks gift card for that. So my name is Sukumar Pandit. I'm happy to be here. Thanks everyone who is attending and watching this. A little bit about myself. My My first experience in telehealth, I didn't realize it at the time. Decades ago, at the Joslin Diabetes Center, I was viewing retinal scans and judging them for the level of diabetic retinopathy. That would have been the asynchronous type of exam. Doctors Chang and Rothschild did a good job talking about the types of exams that are out there. My first modern experience with the synchronous comprehensive exam, the reason was to cover a satellite office that we had. It had about 3 patients a day at the time. So we set up a telehealth solution. That was about 7 or so years ago. Both of these systems, the Joslin and the satellite office, they've evolved, but they still exist and they still function to this day. Doesn't say the year of graduation there, but when I attended, we called it Nuenco. And let's see, that last point, is that a true or false? True. All right, so what's it like to be a remote OD, a remote optometrist? First of all, Tele-Optometry is simply another option out there for docs, and the groundwork, has been laid very well by Drs. Chang and Rothschild, and I am like the end user. I use this, every day that I see patients. Much like CE Wire provides a remote option for your CE, I still attend a conference in person once, maybe twice a year. But the important thing is that I think we should have the choice. And this is just another choice. If you are working from home, there's a couple of considerations to think about. Dedicated space is needed. Mine happens to be the room above the garage, converted into an office. You want to think about ergonomics. I wired that room for Ethernet so I could plug it in. So you have to think about those things. And once you're set up, it's very similar to seeing patients live, but just more efficient. So a hallway review, if you imagine you're standing in a hallway and there's a bunch of exam rooms, doors closed, a hallway review of the chart before entering the room, that's going to be your step one. And typically I like to do this while the patient is still being refracted because that's efficient. And, that's all done. It can be done on your favorite EMR. We have our IT department made our own EMR. Another way that efficiency comes into play is delegation of tasks. You got to be comfortable with delegation. Like Dr. Rothschild mentioned before, the doctor must retain oversight of the process. So someone else is gathering the data, but the doctoring comes in. The doctoring is analyzing all the patient findings, getting the big picture. And then in the end, we have all that information in order to make recommendations and decisions with the patient. And then, with these digital phoropters, delegating the refraction is what took me the longest to get comfortable with. But with the digital phoropters, you can easily refine an RX. And I'll do that if I take a look at the, if the VAs don't match how much the prescription changed or something like that. It's easy to do. Again, talking about choice, you can choose to conduct the entire refraction if you'd like. The choice is there. With all this increased efficiency, what about pace? Still some level of control is still necessary. I like to keep the number of patients at 3 to maybe 4 per hour. Part of that is that I like to finish everything. I check everything ahead of time, talk to the patient for about 5 minutes on a Zoom call, and then I like to finish the charting, certainly sign the RX, but finish up all the charting and be done. I'm certainly not going at a retina specialist pace, but I consider this, controlling the pace. That's part of the doctor oversight. That's your oversight. A lot of flexibility comes from working with a team. We've got a great team at 2020 now. It becomes much easier to cover for each other, whether it's, hey, I've got to run out and do this kid's carpool. I've got a dentist appointment, or most importantly, hey, I got a vacation coming up. Are we going to be okay? There doesn't need to be any drop off in coverage or business nowadays with these systems. I have noted significant monetary savings on the commuting costs and lunch. I was the doc who came in once a week with the trail mix, and I got the good kind, the kind with M&Ms in it, and threw that on the break room table. I'm saving money on that stuff now. Maybe not the trail mix with M&Ms. I've got that on my work desk here. There's a lot of time savings as well. So my morning commute, it was about 45 minutes or so. Coming back from work was about an hour. I wish I could sit here and tell you that I use all that extra time to work out, but that would be a lie. Sometimes I sleep in. We all know those morning minutes are more valuable than minutes, in the other part of the day. Patient demographics, I'm going to differ a little bit here with Dr. Rothschild's when he was talking about the age range. I am willing to see any patient or any person capable of being tested. So if they can do it, then I'll see them. I'll be your doctor. This is a slide about, we always measure the patient experience. It's always been a high satisfaction rate. One thing that doesn't show up in the stats is often, at the end, any further questions, sir, ma'am. I'll receive some appreciation about the process. It's unsolicited because I'm not, asking them about any survey or anything at that point. And it's always, usually it's in comparison to their last eye exam. This is even when their last eye exam was a good experience. And that's significant because it's easy to be the best doc in the world when the patient's last eye exam wasn't that good, right? We've all done that. But it's significant when they're even mentioning it. Hey, my last eye exam was good. This is pretty cool. I didn't know you guys could do this. This is awesome. Here's a slide about Net Promoter Score, patient loyalty. What stands out to me here, higher than Costco. That's pretty amazing. We don't hand out food samples, so that's pretty excellent. This is a slide about how we're doing. Well, for last year, how we did as far as number of exams. I'll just fill them all in. We're on pace to crack 6 figures for total exams this year. I like to say we're in a controlled growth phase at 2020 now. So, it's always growing. I believe there's room. If you're doing things the right way, there's room for you. To anyone who listened to my ramblings, I would like to thank you for your attention. And I'm going to hand off the mouse to Matt Vulich. He's the VP of Accounts and Sales at Visionics.
Thank you, Dr. Pandit, Dr. Rothschild, and Dr. Tchang. I appreciate your time this evening to give us your thoughts and opinions on teleoptometry. It's much appreciated. Very pleased to be here this evening as a representative of Visionics USA and to talk to you about what Visionics devices are needed in a 2020 now teleoptometry setup. And the short answer is it all depends. As a company, we have a robust lineup of equipment. I myself am very passionate about telehealth and Tele-Optometry, mainly because I'm quite the geek as it relates to interoperability of equipment and how it connects to EHRs. I think it's very important to be solution selling and being able to actually eliminate clicks, be able to allow data to easily move and get into EHRs so that it's good for technicians, the users of the equipment. It's very good for the doctor themselves so that they have a great experience. And if you're working on that experience, it's going to translate into the customer experience. I've been in this industry for a long time, and it's really my passion to help eye care professionals improve their practice through technology. And Visionic is quite an innovative company. Telehealth is certainly a very important topic for us because we're designing products that increase the level of screening and capabilities so that doctors can make the decision on what level of telehealth or teleoptometry they want to practice, the experience that you want to give to the customer, the amount of data that you want to have to ensure that you don't miss something. And the thing that's really important for us as a company is to provide to you a piece of equipment that's going to be able to work in a teleoptometry setting with 20/20 now, and then also to be able to work in clinic when you're in clinic. And so with that being said, I'll give a introduction here of the equipment that we have, and really we've got several flavors. And if you are in a situation where you want to expand, you want to be able to see more patients per day, moving, for example, is not going to be an easy thing to do, but you might have a small room that you can utilize. So on the left-hand corner, you have our short chart setup. 20/20 now can actually refract patients with this setup. It's a 3.5-foot setup in length and 20 inches wide. So it doesn't take up much space. Right below is our VX650. This is a multifunctional device that allows you to do a complete assessment of the anterior and posterior of the eye, all in one sitting. So it's quite robust in the data set that it outputs. And from that, just those two devices can certainly act as a telehealth setup for you, or a teleoptometry setup. Additionally, if you wanted to add a slit lamp, you can certainly add a slit lamp to that setup. You can also work in a traditional lane setting. As you see here, the center photo is a setup that we had at Vision Expo East. So our VX65 can set up on a traditional chair and stand. Top right-hand corner is our VX40. This is a great device that is fully automated, and at the touch of a button, a technician can operate it and read a pair of glasses. So de-skilling the operation and making it easy when you have high turnover of staff, the VX40 is a great device. It also can allow you to consult with patients on near task specific glasses, selling multiple pairs of glasses. And then you also have our VX90 in the lower right hand corner, which is a basic ARK with great reliability and results that can certainly feed the 4-opter for the refraction under 20/20 now. If you're looking at a standard lane setup, you'll have to be looking for a device to be able to screen for the back of the eye. And our new VX610 non-mydriatic fundus camera, that device is going to be released here at the Vision Expo West. It has a 45-degree field of view and a 90-degree mosaic. It auto-aligns, auto-focuses. It has a unique cross-polarization light technology to produce really great images. This can also be shared over network, placed in your EMR when you're in clinic, and it can also be utilized in the 20/20 now teleoptometry platform. This is a screen print of our VX120 or 130. This is a device that can be utilized also with our VX610 retinal camera, and with this you get a complete assessment of the anterior of the patient's eye, as well as their entire optical pathway, because it's wavefront. With a wavefront refraction, you're getting a way better screening process because you're doing the entire optical pathway of the patient. If you're getting a good refraction, that means that you've got a healthy eye there generally. If there is a problem there, you need to dig deeper. And from that, it's giving you an additional indicator that a basic ARK might not have. We do topography as standard. You can detect keratoconus, you can detect high order aberrations, so you can consult with the patient. That maybe you're somewhat limited on what you can actually prescribe here in terms of glasses and what it's going to do for them. We get anterior chamber analysis that delivers tonometry and recalculated IOP because we're getting pachymetry together with it. With the VX120 and 130, you're going to get a Scheimpflug image with it, and with the Scheimpflug image, that's advantageous for glaucoma assessment. In this particular situation, you're seeing a screenshot of narrow angles. So here with the Scheimpflug image, you're getting angle measurement and a pachymetry map. Additionally, you're getting a white to white and anterior chamber depth. So with this higher level of screening, it certainly provides more detail and a robust set of data that you can evaluate for the patient that might lead to, dry eye perhaps, or specialty contact lenses because you're using the wavefront data. And with some specialty contacts, you might be able to help the patient improve their vision from that information. We also have visual aids for improved patient care and education. This is great. It certainly helps patients and the caregivers visually to see the difference between a daytime and nighttime refraction. This can lead to multiple pairs of glasses. It also helps them see how they're going to see with or without contacts, and being able to show that difference based on the high order aberrations that they may have. So it's a great tool to be able to educate patients. And we can also get a cataract assessment with it. With the VX120 and 130, it has an ability to do a cataract assessment when it's acquiring the wavefront refraction. And from this, you can certainly educate patients further as it relates to the state of their cataract. You can also detect if they have an IOL, if there's something wrong with that IOL, if it's tilted, decentered, or out of position. How to receive more information about tele-optometry and Visionics devices and how they can help you start a tele-optometry program within your business. We will send a link out so that you can book a free no obligation consultation after filling out the form. A Visionics team member will reach out via email, and if there's a desire to speak to a 2020 Now consultant, we'll then connect you with the sales team from 2020 Now. I'm going to now hand it over to Adam, and we're going to do some questions, some answers to some of your questions. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Matt, and thanks to all of our speakers here tonight. So we have a bunch of questions. So let me actually try to sort them, and we'll get going here. First question, and I guess probably Noel, you'd be the person to answer this one. Talking about the doctors that are 2020 Now doctors. Obviously, everyone has their own license in whatever state they're practicing in. How does it work with 2020 Now? Do you actually have your doctors in that same state, or do they practice elsewhere? How does that actually work when someone wants to utilize a 2020 Now doctor?
Great question. Absolutely. So most of our doctors have anywhere from 1 to, I think Dr. Pandit holds the record, probably 30 licenses. And so, making sure that we have cross coverage across all the states, because as Dr. Pandit said, if someone needs an hour off, if someone needs to be out, then having that cross coverage with multiple of our doctors really helps. So as we enter new states, we have a licensing team that's always working with our doctors to determine which states we need to get our doctors licensed in, how many. And then the really fun part is the CE requirements for all of those state licenses and keeping track of that.
Something I'm familiar with for sure. And so that brings me to another question then, though. So what happens with scheduling? So obviously you have a large number of doctors on staff. When a practice signs up with you to work with a 2020 Now doctor, you're obviously guaranteeing them service, right? Like for certain times of day. Is that how that works?
Absolutely, yeah. So depends on the state, of course, and making sure how many doctors we have online. But in most states, our coverage is 9:30 to 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday. guaranteed coverage. Now, of course, there's very rare situations where an emergency happens and sites have to be notified. The only exception to that is California. Hours of operations are Tuesday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., just because of labor laws in California.
Right. And so you guys are on top of all that, so you'll know what works and what won't straight away.
Exactly. And if it's a new state where we're not yet established and potentially can only use ophthalmologists as opposed to optometrists on our team, then we would be offering the ophthalmologist hours when they work.
Right. And so I guess another follow-up question then would be, if someone doesn't really know the rules, if they just contact you when they're getting their demo, maybe you could run it down for them for their particular state, what the rules actually are.
Yeah, so our whole team would assist in that process, and we have a whole compliance department and a licensing specialist to stay on top of all those moving pieces as they rapidly change as technology progresses.
Right. So question here, this is an interesting one. Is the platform used at all in mobile clinic settings?
I can take that one, yeah. So we do have a couple mobile clinics. I believe there's one in New York that we utilize, and that's a little bit more challenging to set up and figure out the logistics, particularly the internet connection, and making sure that that's stable can be the biggest hurdle, but definitely an option. Certain states don't allow it, but there are states where that's a viable option and can be a great way, nursing homes, for example, or just having that mobility to access multiple different locations and patients. Right.
I guess there's a two-part question here. So the first question is the cost. How does this actually work, the economics of it? Is it on a per exam basis, or how does it work?
I'm happy to jump in here, guys, but if anyone else wants to, feel free. I don't want to take up all the time and space. So our team would go through all the specifics of that. The contracts and the way that everything's priced differs for the comprehensive exam versus a state that offers comprehensive and contact lens. But that's exactly right in the concept that when a patient comes in and if our services are utilized, meaning our doctors, then that would be a per click fee. Whereas if the platform is utilized, that contract and that agreement is going to be different.
Got it. And question here, this particular person has a variety of different equipment made by different manufacturers in their office already. How does that work with your platform? Can it actually integrate with, sort of non-Visionics equipment as well if they have some of that in their office too?
I'll go ahead and jump in on that. So, it is, they can integrate with all kinds of equipment. So that's why it depends. There's an evaluation of the equipment that you have. And really from the standpoint, it's what is in your best interest. We as a company are partnering with 2020 Now as a strategic partner to try to provide solutions that are going to make the experience better. And again, provide, a larger set of data that you might not see in some other offices. So the patient experience is also really good. So those are some of the things that are the spirit of our strategic partnership.
Right. And question here, I don't know if Dr. Pandit might want to answer this one with his 30 licenses. Sort of going back to the fact that you can use heterogeneous equipment when you're evaluating a patient. You might be seeing output from devices, that you might not be familiar with or might work differently from other devices. So I guess the question is, are you able to actually work with all the data that these practices are giving you, even though they're using so many diverse pieces of equipment?
Yeah, that's a good question. The answer is yes, because before it reaches that point, before it reaches me, the IT team is out there integrating everything. There's different fundus cameras out there, but they're all giving me the same information, right? So as a doc, I'm as the end user doc, I'm getting all that information that I'm familiar with. Whenever there's different sites have their own different equipment that they use, it sort of gets into the first part of the question, but everything is tested out and integrated ahead of time before we actually start seeing live patients. Typically, not typically, all the time really, we go through some test patients, testing the other workers, testing each other, and I'll hop on and say, hey, this looks great, or, hey, a couple inches to the left, or, that kind of thing. So all that's worked out before real people, real patients come through.
Right. And there's an interesting question, I guess it's in a similar vein. So we've all had, examples where you do a bunch of stuff in pre-testing, you look at the output and you're like, oh, this is terrible, like redo it, please. And you send it back, right? Does this happen frequently, or I know that a lot of doctors handle their own quality control that way and might be a little bit nervous about handing that off. So I guess the question is, how can they ensure that the data that you're getting is good?
Great question. That was one of my biggest qualms 7 years ago or whenever it was. I don't have that issue anymore. In office, I would do it myself. These IOPs don't make any sense. There's a 10 difference. I would go in after the hallway review. I would go into the room and do it myself. Now I'm reviewing while they're refracting, and I tell them, hey, let's get another set of IOPs because of the difference. I always give them the reason. Maybe I give it too much. I'm not like, do the IOPs in all caps. Anything can be redone. I like to do the redos ahead of time before I talk to them. I want everything done. I want to know everything about a patient before I come in and say, hey, what's up? How often does it happen? I mean, it happens. If it happened too often, I would go insane. I don't think it happens too often. When it happens, we've got good protocols in place to handle it, and we take care of it.
Right. And if you don't mind, if I could jump in there as well, that's a really good example that Dr. Pandit gave of rule number one. Ultimately, he's responsible for that patient's care. And if you get numbers that just aren't adding up, you can retest it. And if it doesn't add up again, he's got to decide what to do about that. And so that's just a really good example of how to do that. And as the practice owner, we're on that side to make sure that the staff is giving reliable data and responsive to the online doctors.
Right.
And I would just add in, something that I didn't think about beforehand, or I guess that I was curious about, is how is this happening? Are the doctors like messaging someone via Zoom or a chat? But that's where our system, we can put the status of the patient on our workflow into a retest, so that the site is aware why the retest is needed, and so that it's flashing at them and indicating that the retest is needed before the doctor video calls in. So
right.
That makes the workflow a lot easier for the doctors and our operations team.
Yeah, because that's another question we just got here, this idea of a back channel. I hadn't really thought about it myself, but there's sometimes where you just want to talk, right? You want to like get in contact with the other doctor and say, hey, like what's going on here, and not do it in front of the patient. So I guess that's the question, like how do you actually do that sort of back and forth without the patient watching you do it?
With like the technician, is that the question?
Yeah, so like if Dr. Pandit had something to communicate that you don't necessarily want the patient to hear, sort of more shop talk, how does that actually work? Do you just communicate using the platform before the patient is even in the chair?
Dr. Pandit, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we do. If there's so we've got the live dashboard going on, we can mess. We actually have multiple ways to talk to either the tech. Another thing, we can talk to other docs. I always like being in a group practice. You see something interesting. In school, you would always come in, hey, look at this cool, corneal ulcer, and then 5 docs would line up and do it. So we've got different ways, different chats to talk to the technician if they want to know, hey, why do I have to redo these IOPs? Talk to other docs about interesting cases. We've got that.
Right. And again, like for instance, let's say that you get someone whose pressures are absolutely out of control. A tech may not know or understand what that really means. So you're able to actually communicate this effectively, like this is an emergency.
Absolutely. Yeah. And unfortunately, that's happened a few times, but yes.
So question here. Oh, interesting. A HIPAA question. How about that? is the platform HIPAA compliant? I'm going to guess the answer is yes. And what do you do to secure it?
Oh, I could not delve into the details. That would be all our compliance and IT department, but they are very on top of it. We just underwent, some like big internal work to ensure that we're in compliance. So yeah, absolutely, that's always of the utmost importance in making sure that the patient's data and privacy is protected.
Right.
I would add, along with the legal department too, is in there.
Yeah.
Yep. Question here: how long does a doc normally spend with a patient? Given that everything is done, right, with all the pre-testing, and the doc has reviewed it before the patient encounter even begins?
Yeah, that's great. I'll take this if nobody else minds. So the reason I got into optometry, this is my second career. The reason I got into it is to talk to people. It's that interaction. It's that back and forth. I was working in the biotech field, and I realized I don't want to be in the lab with the same 5 other guys for the rest of my life. I did 2 things. I applied to optometry school, and I got in, and I became a bartender. And I got to talk to people, right, in both of those. Unfortunately, I had to give up the bartending job. I would say I come in and chat with them. The average is maybe 4 or 5 minutes, and that's an average. It can be as little or as long as it needs to be. But I'm going in armed with all the information, verifying stuff, asking what they like to do, other stuff. I'm chatting with them. That I don't know that that's oversight, but that's choice. That's up to you as the doc. How long you want that to be, how short you want that to be. And you do that now. You do it live. That is the same as doing it on the video call.
And let me jump in there as well, because I do think, and Dr. Pandit has seen a lot of patients in my practice and is great with the patients. They love him and has a flair for that. But I will say that doing it myself, after 20 years of seeing patients the traditional way, if you will, it changes your way of thinking, and you've got to do it, because typically, the way I grew up doing it was you talk to the patient, get a complaint, the SOAP format, right? You go in order. And so you get the subjective conversations, then you do your objective testing. So if you're looking at the data, looking at all the insights, you're looking at the history form, the refraction, the images, you pretty much know what to do before you go in. And so what I had to do is make sure that I didn't let that influence me to interrupt the conversation, because you still have to talk to the patient. You still have to get some insights from what the patient is saying, because you don't know what's bothering them until you had that conversation. So some platforms, some providers skip that part, skip the patient interaction. And to me, it's a critically important piece. And every doctor still has their own style. They're still following rule number 1. And so they talk as long as they need to get what they need out of the patient. And it depends on the patient too, probably. You probably have chatty patients that like to talk more than others. So anyway, I think that it's Dr. Pandit's one of the best for sure.
Right.
And I would add one small caveat, if that's okay. Just that, for states where refraction is required, that of course is going to look more like a traditional exam time, where it's 15, 20 minutes, 25 for that patient, where it's a little bit more complicated, or where verification is needed, trial frame, of course, that the time frame is going to look a little bit different. But all of our docs, they're confirming the name, date of birth of the patient, they're making sure we know what they're coming in for, and then they're reviewing the refractive findings and the final prescription and the eye health with the patient. There's a very standard kind of expectation. Now, of course, everyone can add their own flair to that, but to ensure that there's consistency and that the correct patient is in the chair.
Right. Interesting question here. I didn't think about this either. Do practices, or do you guys maintain a list if a patient needs to be referred out to, say, an ophthalmologist, right, for surgical intervention, so that the techs will have an idea of where to send someone?
Yeah, I can take that one. So with referrals, there's multi-step process. First step is always going to be that referral is written by the doctor and reviewed with the patient. so that they're aware of what's going on. Second step is going to be to ask them if they want assistance in getting seen somewhere, which usually the answer is yes, but sometimes they want to take it to their primary care and talk to them first. And so from there, then there's the databases that each specific location has for providers in that area that we can refer to, and the patient is assisted if they want that assistance.
Right.
I would just add, I have never referred to other optometry offices as much as I do now.
Fascinating. And so what's interesting to me, I guess, maybe you can speak to that. So when you say you make that referral, do you have a list of all the other optometrists in their local area, or do the docs give you a preferred list of folks to send out to? How does that actually work?
We work with each individual office, and you know, we come in with, they know the area the best, and then so we kind of work with them. Does every single office have a list? That I don't know, but we work with the individual offices, and for, you know, for this type of referral, this is what's needed. For this type of referral, this is what's needed. And personally, you know, if it's not a procedure, or if it's a state where an OD can do a procedure, I tell them, let's send it to the OD's office.
Right.
And a lot of the sites that we work with also have on-site associates who are there at least a few days a week. So that's where, you know, I think as a field, there's sometimes concern that maybe the telehealth exams are going to take away from the need for in-person care and providers. But really, like, this synergy, it has to exist. And as we see more patients who are in these rural areas and able to, get access, then those patients also are now often needing seen by an in-person optometrist or ophthalmologist. So just something I think that we all, you know, need to think about, and that we're always making sure on our quality control side that we're, you know, closing those referral loops and ensuring that the patients get the secondary care they need.
Right.
And I'd like to say one more thing about that. If you're an optometrist and you're receiving these referrals from these remote doctors, if you will, be a good referral source. And you know, I think that it's important that when you get them, you're grateful for those referrals so that they'll continue to refer to you, because it is a great source of referral, because they're filling a need that we who have physical practices aren't filling as well. So when you get those referrals, it's just like referring to a cataract surgery. You know, you want to make that referring doctor look good in the patient's eyes.
Yep.
Practice management thought, I think, is real important.
Absolutely. Interesting question here, continuity of care question. So will the patient ever see the same doctor twice, or do certain offices like to work with certain 20/20 now doctors? How does that actually work?
You want me to take that, or you got it, Dr.
Well, I can give an example. I saw a patient, it was earlier this week. I had seen them 4 times previously. Logistics. I mean, if the logistics work out, you know, we do try to do that for the continuity of care whenever possible.
Yeah, so basically on our workflow, you know, if a patient, I'll just use the example of a contact lens follow-up. If the patient comes in for a contact lens exam, they see Dr. Pandit on a Monday. Well, if he works Monday through Thursday and he's off on Friday, but the patient wants to come in for the follow-up on Friday or Saturday, then we still are able to see them, but they just see another doctor on our team who's licensed in that state. So if they came back on a Wednesday when Dr. Pandit was there, you know, we'd try and have them routed to him. But that way we're still able to get patients seen. Often, you know, they want seen as quickly as possible in a time frame that works for them in their schedule.
And I think we have time for one more question here, and this is a more of a practice management question. So we've all been in the experience, you know, of trying to recommend a contact lens to a patient, right, or a second pair and stuff like that. Is this something that the doctors of 20/20 now handle, or do they just sort of hand that back to the tech for them to sort of take it from there once the exam is over?
I can take that. I do what I've always done. It's a discussion. We talk about pros and cons, but If it's coming from the patient's perspective, they're an IT. So, hey, here's your everyday glasses. Here's your computer progressives. So I talk about, the options out there, patient specific, which is what I've always done in my career.
Right. And you're very aware of the capabilities of a particular practice, right? If they happen to have a large optical, or, if the doc doesn't necessarily do contact lenses and so forth, right? You have a good sense of what the practice can and will do.
Absolutely.
Our software helps track, and it has like flags and information about what the specific location has available on site. If they have an automated visual field, for example, or if they would need to be referred out for situations where that's needed, or maybe that site doesn't do contact lenses based on state restrictions. So all that information. And then, like, as you were speaking to with the question, Adam, maybe a site carries a lot of Precision 1 lenses, but they don't have any Cooper Vision products. Well, in our EMR, we're able to highlight which lenses the sites have available on site, so that, since we live in an era where people usually want something and we want it now, then the patient can be fit in the contact lenses that are available there on site. So these are all things that we're constantly thinking through. And trying to make sure that the flow and the display of everything and the clarity is there when we work with over 400 different sites.
All right. Well, I think we are just about out of time, but thank you so much, everyone, for being here tonight. An archive of this webinar will be available on ODwire probably within the next few days, so you can go back there to see it. We'll also send everybody who registered a follow-up email with links to the archive, and we'll also send out an email with links if people want to get a demo, so they can actually go see this for themselves. And if there are any other questions, again, where this is housed on ODwire, there's going to be a discussion thread right beneath this archive. Feel free to fire away, and I'll make sure that everyone's questions get answered. So again, thank you everyone for being here tonight, and I guess I will see everyone at the next webinar. So good night, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.